The village of Ban Nong lay nestled between sprawling jungles and towering mountains, a serene picture of isolation. To the casual observer, it seemed like an idyllic haven, where the old Hmong traditions thrived in harmony with nature. But the locals knew the forest held secrets, dark enough to send chills down the spine of even the bravest souls. Siang, a restless and curious 17-year-old, found the whispered warnings of his elders more intriguing than frightening. The elders would sit in a circle under the banyan tree recounting tales of the tiger ghost. It was said that this spirit, half tiger and half human, roamed the jungle, preying on those who disrespected the forest's sanctity. The stories painted vivid images of glowing eyes, the stench of death, and claws that tore through flesh as if it were paper. One humid evening, as the setting sun bathed the village in shades of gold, Siang approached his grandmother. She was the most respected storyteller in the village and held the repository of countless myths. He leaned closer as she prepared herbal tea over the fire. "Grandmother, tell me the truth," he implored. "What is the tiger ghost? Is it real?" Her hands paused mid-stir. The firelight flickered across her lined face, casting deep shadows. "It is not a question of real or not, child," she murmured. "The forest remembers those who dishonor it. The tiger ghost is the memory of vengeance." Siang frowned. Her cryptic reply only fueled his curiosity. "But no one has seen it, right? They're just stories to keep kids from wandering off." His grandmother's gaze turned steely. "No one sees the tiger ghost and lives to tell the tale." The conversation ended there, but the seed of intrigue had taken root. That night, as the village grew silent under a blanket of stars, Siang made a plan. He would venture into the jungle with his two closest friends, Kang and Mai, to seek the truth about the tiger ghost. After all, wasn't it time for the old superstitions to be debunked? The following morning, Siang, Kang, and Mai packed supplies and set off toward the jungle's edge. The villagers watched them go with a mix of curiosity and disapproval. As the trio entered the forest, the air grew cooler, heavy with the earthy scent of moss and decay. Sunlight barely penetrated the dense canopy, and the sounds of chirping birds and rustling leaves seemed muted, as if the jungle itself were holding its breath. Kang, ever the joker, picked up a stick and held it like a spear. "So, Siang, where's your ghost tiger?" "I'll fight it off if it shows up." Mai rolled her eyes. "Let's just focus on not getting lost, okay?" Hours passed as they trekked deeper into the jungle. The trees grew larger, their gnarled roots snaking across the ground like sleeping serpents. They stumbled upon strange claw marks etched deep into the bark of a tree. The marks were impossibly large, too high to have been made by any ordinary animal. "Whoa," Mai whispered, her voice trembling. "What kind of creature could do this?" Siang's heart raced. He reached out to touch the marks, only to jerk his hand back as if burned. The claw marks exuded a faint heat, as if they had been freshly made. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows, they found a clearing with what appeared to be an animal carcass. The smell hit them first, a sickly sweet odor of rotting flesh. The carcass was shredded, its innards strewn across the forest floor. King gagged. This isn't normal." "Let's head back," Mai urged, fear etched across her face. But Siang shook his head. "Not yet. We came here for answers." They pressed on until twilight, their nerves fraying with each step. Just as they decided to turn back, a guttural growl echoed through the trees. It was low and menacing, vibrating through their very bones. "What was that?" Mai hissed, clutching Siang's arm. "Stay calm," he whispered, though his own voice shook. The growl came again, closer this time. They froze, their eyes scanning the shadows for movement. Then, just beyond the tree line, they saw it, a pair of glowing yellow eyes watching them, unblinking. The three of them bolted, their footsteps pounding against the forest floor. The growl followed, morphing into a blood-curdling roar that seemed to shake the earth itself. When they finally burst out of the jungle and into the safety of the village, they were gasping for breath, their faces pale. Siang turned back toward the trees, but the glowing eyes were gone. "Never again," Mai panted. "We're never going back there." But Siang couldn't shake the feeling that the tiger ghost had marked them. That night, Siang could barely sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the glowing yellow ones staring back at him from the jungle's shadows. The growl echoed in his ears, low and guttural, like a predator savoring its prey. He awoke in a cold sweat, his room cloaked in darkness except for the faint glow of moonlight filtering through the cracks in the bamboo walls. A chill ran down his spine as he realized the usual night sounds of insects and distant howls were absent. The silence was suffocating. Suddenly, a soft scratching noise came from outside his door. It was faint at first, almost like the rustling of leaves. Then it grew louder, more insistent, like claws dragging against wood. "Siang." A whisper, low and rasping, drifted through the still air. He froze, his breath catching in his throat. Was it his imagination? "Siang. Come to me." His heart pounded as he reached for the knife his father had given him for protection. Summoning every ounce of courage, he flung the door open, only to find nothing. The village was bathed in the silvery glow of the moon, utterly still. But as he looked down, his blood ran cold. Scratched into the wooden planks of the porch were deep claw marks. They formed a pattern, one he didn't recognize but felt strangely familiar. The next morning, he told Keng and Mai what had happened. Keng, always the skeptic, dismissed it as a bad dream. Mai, however, looked genuinely concerned. "Siang, I think we need to speak to the village elder," she said firmly. "He might know what's happening." Reluctantly, Siang agreed. The elder, a wiry old man named To, listened intently as they recounted their story. His expression grew graver with each word. "You should not have entered the jungle," he said finally, his voice heavy with disapproval. "The tiger ghost is no mere legend. It is a spirit of vengeance, cursed to guard the forest from those who defile it." "But we didn't do anything," Siang protested. To shook his head. "The forest sees your presence as a threat, and now it has marked you." He explained that the claw marks on Siang's porch were not random. They were a warning. "Tonight is the full moon," To continued. "You must stay inside, no matter what you hear or see. Do not open your doors or windows. If you do, the tiger ghost will claim you." Despite To's warning, the trio couldn't shake the feeling of impending doom. That evening, the village seemed unusually quiet. Even the dogs, which normally barked at every rustle of the wind, huddled silently in their corners. Siang barricaded himself in his room as instructed. He lit a small oil lamp and placed it by his bedside, its flickering glow casting dancing shadows on the walls. Hours passed, but sleep eluded him. Around midnight, the growling began. It was faint at first, coming from the direction of the jungle, but it grew louder, closer, until it seemed to surround the house. Siang clutched his knife, his knuckles white. The growling was accompanied by the unmistakable sound of claws scratching against wood. "Siang." The whisper was back, more insistent this time. "Siang, come outside." He squeezed his eyes shut, trying to block out the sound. But then he heard something that made his blood run cold. The voice of his mother, who had passed away years ago. "Siang, it's me. Open the door, my son." Tears streamed down his face as he struggled with the temptation to believe. But he remembered To's warning and stayed put. Outside, the growling turned into a deafening roar. The entire house shook as if an earthquake had struck. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, it stopped. The next morning, Siang found claw marks not just on his door, but all over his house. It was clear that the tiger ghost was growing more aggressive. Desperate for answers, he returned to To, who revealed a shocking truth. The tiger ghost's wrath was not random. It targeted those whose ancestors had wronged the forest. "Your great-grandfather was a hunter," To explained. "He killed a sacred tiger, one that was said to be the guardian spirit of the jungle. That spirit cursed your bloodline, vowing to haunt your family until its debt to the forest was repaid." Sieng was stunned. He had never heard this story before. "How do I stop it?" he asked, his voice trembling. "There is a ritual," To said, "but it is dangerous. You must enter the jungle during the next full moon and face the spirit. Only then can the curse be lifted." Despite the risks, Sieng knew he had no choice. On the night of the next full moon, Sieng ventured into the jungle alone. The air was thick with tension, and the sounds of the forest seemed distant and muted, as if even nature itself was holding its breath. Armed with the items To had given him, a ceremonial dagger, a bundle of herbs, and a small vial of sacred water, he made his way to the clearing where the claw marks had first appeared. The tiger ghost emerged from the shadows, its massive form both terrifying and mesmerizing. Its glowing eyes locked onto Sieng, and it let out a roar that shook the ground beneath his feet. Sieng began the ritual, chanting the incantation To had taught him. The tiger ghost circled him, its growls growing louder, more furious. As he poured the sacred water onto the ground, the spirit let out a blood-curdling scream. For a moment it seemed to waver, its form flickering like a flame in the wind. But then it lunged. Sieng barely dodged in time, slashing at the spirit with the ceremonial dagger. The blade connected, and the tiger ghost let out a howl of pain. Its form began to dissolve, breaking apart into wisps of smoke that disappeared into the night. When it was over, Sieng collapsed to the ground, exhausted but relieved. He had done it. The curse was lifted, or so he thought. Months later, as he sat by the river, enjoying the peace he had fought so hard to reclaim, he heard a familiar growl. Turning slowly, he saw them, 2 pairs of glowing yellow eyes watching him from the tree line. The jungle never forgets. In the heart of a remote Hmong village nestled among the rolling hills of Laos, the villagers had always lived in harmony with nature. The dense forests that surrounded their homes were both a source of life and mystery, filled with ancient legends that whispered of spirits and curses. One such legend was that of the Shifting Stripes, a tiger spirit that could assume human form. It was said to punish those who disrespected the forest's balance, though few alive had claimed to encounter it. Kang, a hunter known for his skill and audacity, scoffed at these stories. To him, the jungle was a source of game, and nothing more. He had little patience for the villagers' superstitions. One fateful morning, Kang decided to venture deeper into the forest than anyone dared. Armed with his bow and a quiver of arrows, he set out before dawn, ignoring the warnings of the elder. "You tempt fate," the elder had said, his voice heavy with concern. "The Shifting Stripes watches those who stray too far." Kang laughed it off. "The only stripes I fear are on the tigers I hunt." The forest grew darker as Kang pushed deeper. The trees towered above him, their canopy so dense that even the midday sun struggled to pierce through. The air was heavy, thick with the scent of moss and decay. Hours passed with no sign of game. Frustrated, Kang cursed under his breath and was about to turn back when he noticed something unusual. A single perfectly straight path lined with golden grass. It led deeper into the heart of the forest, a place no one had ventured before. Curiosity got the better of him. As he followed the path, a strange sensation washed over him. The air felt colder and the usual forest sounds seemed to fade, replaced by an eerie silence. At the end of the path stood a man. He was tall and lean, with piercing amber eyes that seemed to glow in the dim light. His face was serene, almost otherworldly, but his presence sent a shiver down Kang's spine. "You are far from home, hunter," the man said, his voice smooth but unnervingly hollow. Kang tightened his grip on his bow. "And who are you to tell me where I belong?" The man smiled, revealing sharp, white teeth, A friend or a foe? That depends on you. Before Kayang could respond, the man vanished, leaving only a faint echo of his laughter. Kayang returned to the village unsettled but determined not to show it. He convinced himself that the encounter was a figment of his imagination, a trick of the forest playing on his nerves. That night, however, strange things began to happen. As Kayang prepared to sleep, he noticed scratches on the walls of his hut, deep gouges that hadn't been there before. His hunting bow, which he always kept by his bed, had been split cleanly in two. He heard a growl outside his window, low and menacing. When he peeked through the bamboo slats, he saw nothing but shadows. The next morning, Kayang sought out the elder. "I met a man in the forest," Kayang admitted reluctantly. "He warned me, but I ignored him. Now, strange things are happening." The elder's face turned ashen. "The shifting stripes has marked you. That was no man. It was the spirit of the jungle. You must appease it before it claims you." "Appease it? How?" Kayang demanded. "You must return to the forest and offer a gift of great value, something that shows respect and humility." Kayang scoffed. "I owe the jungle nothing." The elder's eyes narrowed. "Then you are a fool. And fools do not last long under the shifting stripes' gaze." Kayang ignored the elder's advice and went about his days as if nothing had happened. But the forest was not done with him. Each night, the growls grew louder, closer. The scratches on his walls multiplied, forming intricate patterns that seemed almost deliberate. His livestock began to disappear, one by one, their pens torn apart as if by massive claws. The villagers avoided Kayang, whispering that he had angered the spirit and brought a curse upon them all. Even his closest friends kept their distance. One night, Kayang awoke to find his hut bathed in an eerie golden light. Standing at the foot of his bed was the man from the forest, his amber eyes glowing in the darkness. "You were warned, hunter," the man said, his voice laced with anger. "Now you will pay the price." Kayang tried to reach for his knife, but his body wouldn't move. The man stepped closer, his form beginning to shift. His limbs elongated, his features twisted, and before Kayang's terrified eyes, he transformed into a massive tiger with shimmering stripes that seemed to ripple like water. The tiger roared, its breath hot against Kayang's face. And then, it was gone. Kayang woke in a cold sweat, his body trembling. The encounter with the tiger spirit felt too real to be a nightmare. He staggered outside, hoping the fresh air would calm him, but what he saw made his blood run cold. The villagers were gathered around the outskirts of the forest, pointing at something horrifying. A trail of massive claw marks, carved deep into the earth, led from the jungle to Kayang's hut. Around his home, the scratches formed a perfect circle as if the spirit had marked its territory. "You've brought this curse upon us," one villager shouted. Kayang tried to defend himself, but no one listened. Panic spread through the village. Families packed their belongings, fleeing to safer lands. Left alone, Kayang felt his resolve crumble. The once proud hunter was now a pariah, abandoned by those he had called friends. Determined to end this torment, Kayang ventured back into the forest. The air was thick with menace, each shadow seeming to move with purpose. As he pushed deeper, he began to see things. Phantoms of his past, failures and regrets manifesting in the trees. He stumbled upon the golden path once more, but this time it wasn't empty. Bones, cracked and weathered, littered the trail. At the end stood the tiger spirit, its amber eyes glowing with malice. "You should have listened," it growled, its voice reverberating through the forest. Kayang fell to his knees. "What do you want from me?" The tiger prowled closer, its stripes shifting hypnotically. "Your arrogance has disrupted the balance. You owe a debt to the forest, a life for a life." The village of Ban Nong lay nestled between sprawling jungles and towering mountains, a serene picture of isolation. To the casual observer, it seemed like an idyllic haven, where the old Hmong traditions thrived in harmony with nature. But the locals knew the forest held secrets, dark enough to send chills down the spine of even the bravest souls. Sieng, a restless and curious 17-year-old, found the whispered warnings of his elders more intriguing than frightening. The elders would sit in a circle under the banyan tree recounting tales of the tiger ghost. It was said that this spirit, half tiger and half human, roamed the jungle, preying on those who disrespected the forest's sanctity. The stories painted vivid images of glowing eyes, the stench of death, and claws that tore through flesh as if it were paper. One humid evening, as the setting sun bathed the village in shades of gold, Sieng approached his grandmother. She was the most respected storyteller in the village and held the repository of countless myths. He leaned closer as she prepared herbal tea over the fire. "Grandmother, tell me the truth," he implored. "What is the tiger ghost? Is it real?" Her hands paused mid-stir. The firelight flickered across her lined face, casting deep shadows. "It is not a question of real or not, child," she murmured. "The forest remembers those who dishonor it. The tiger ghost is the memory of vengeance." Sieng frowned. Her cryptic reply only fueled his curiosity. "But no one has seen it, right? They're just stories to keep kids from wandering off." His grandmother's gaze turned steely. "No one sees the tiger ghost and lives to tell the tale." The conversation ended there, but the seed of intrigue had taken root. That night, as the village grew silent under a blanket of stars, Sieng made a plan. He would venture into the jungle with his two closest friends, Keng and Mai, to seek the truth about the tiger ghost. After all, wasn't it time for the old superstitions to be debunked? The following morning, Sieng, Keng, and Mai packed supplies and set off toward the jungle's edge. The villagers watched them go with a mix of curiosity and disapproval. As the trio entered the forest, the air grew cooler, heavy with the earthy scent of moss and decay. Sunlight barely penetrated the dense canopy, and the sounds of chirping birds and rustling leaves seemed muted, as if the jungle itself were holding its breath. Keng, ever the joker, picked up a stick and held it like a spear. "So, Sieng, where's your ghost tiger?" "I'll fight it off if it shows up." Mai rolled her eyes. "Let's just focus on not getting lost, okay?" Hours passed as they trekked deeper into the jungle. The trees grew larger, their gnarled roots snaking across the ground like sleeping serpents. They stumbled upon strange claw marks etched deep into the bark of a tree. The marks were impossibly large, too high to have been made by any ordinary animal. "Whoa," Mai whispered, her voice trembling. What kind of creature could do this? Sieng's heart raced. He reached out to touch the marks, only to jerk his hand back as if burned. The claw marks exuded a faint heat, as if they had been freshly made. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows, they found a clearing with what appeared to be an animal carcass. The smell hit them first, a sickly sweet odor of rotting flesh. The carcass was shredded, its innards strewn across the forest floor. Keng gagged. This isn't normal. "Let's head back," Mai urged, fear etched across her face. But Sieng shook his head. "Not yet. We came here for answers." They pressed on until twilight, their nerves fraying with each step. Just as they decided to turn back, a guttural growl echoed through the trees. It was low and menacing, vibrating through their very bones. "What was that?" Mai hissed, clutching Sieng's arm. "Stay calm," he whispered, though his own voice shook. The growl came again, closer this time. They froze, their eyes scanning the shadows for movement. Then, just beyond the tree line, they saw it. A pair of glowing yellow eyes watching them, unblinking. The three of them bolted, their footsteps pounding against the forest floor. The growl followed, morphing into a blood-curdling roar that seemed to shake the earth itself. When they finally burst out of the jungle and into the safety of the village, they were Keng's mind raced. He thought of the elders' advice, a gift of great value, one that showed respect and humility. But what could he offer? He had nothing left, no livestock, no possessions, and no allies. The tiger spirit seemed to sense his despair. There is only one gift the forest will accept now. Kayang realized what it meant. The price for his transgressions was his own life. "Will my death end this curse?" he asked, his voice trembling. The tiger nodded solemnly. "It will restore balance, but only if offered willingly." Kayang closed his eyes, his mind flashing through memories of his life, the hunts, the victories, and the times he had laughed in the face of danger. He had always believed himself untouchable, but now he understood the weight of his arrogance. Taking a deep breath, Kayang rose to his feet. "If my life will save the village, then take it." The tiger's eyes softened, and for a brief moment, Kayang thought he saw a glimmer of sadness. "You have made the right choice," it said. With a roar that echoed through the forest, the tiger lunged. Kayang felt a searing pain as the spirit's claws raked across his chest. His vision blurred, and the world faded to black. When Kayang awoke, he was lying at the edge of the village. His wounds were gone, but a faint scar ran across his chest in the shape of tiger stripes. The village had returned to normal. The curse was lifted, and the villagers, though wary, began to rebuild. Kayang, however, was a changed man. He no longer hunted for sport. Instead, he became a protector of the forest, ensuring that no one else would repeat his mistakes. The tiger spirit never appeared again, but Kayang often felt its presence in the rustling leaves and the distant growls of the jungle. From that day forward, the legend of the shifting stripes grew stronger, serving as a reminder of the fragile balance between man and nature and the price of arrogance. In a remote Hmong province surrounded by dense forests and towering mountains, there lay a peak shrouded in perpetual mist. Known as Mount Bai, the villagers regarded it with a mix of reverence and dread. The elders told stories of a white tiger spirit that guarded the mountain. The tiger wasn't just a guardian, it was a judge. Legends claimed that those with pure hearts could climb Mount Bai and return blessed with wisdom and strength. But those who carried ill intentions would vanish into the mist, their screams lost to the winds. May, a young woman from the village, grew up hearing these stories. Unlike her peers, who avoided even looking at the mountain, May was intrigued. Orphaned at a young age, she had always felt like an outsider, her only solace being the wilds surrounding her. One day, May overheard a heated discussion among the villagers. "The tiger has taken another one," an elder said gravely. "It's punishment," replied another, "for crossing the forbidden boundary." The idea of the white tiger being more than a legend fascinated May. Desperate to prove herself and uncover the truth, she decided to climb Mount Bai. Before dawn, May packed her satchel with essentials, dried meat, water, and a knife. As the village slept, she slipped away into the forest, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and excitement. The journey to Mount Bai was treacherous. The forest seemed alive, whispering secrets May couldn't understand. The trees grew denser the closer she got to the mountain, their branches intertwining to form natural arches. When she reached the base of the mountain, the mist was so thick she could barely see her own hands. A sudden chill swept through the air, and May felt an invisible force pulling her forward. "Is this the tiger?" she whispered, clutching her satchel tightly. Her ascent was grueling. The path was steep and uneven, littered with jagged rocks and thorny bushes. As she climbed higher, she began to notice strange symbols carved into the stones, ancient runes that seemed to pulse faintly. Hours passed, and the mist grew thicker. It wrapped around May like a living entity, making it impossible to tell where she was going. Exhausted, she paused to rest on a flat rock. Suddenly, a low growl echoed through the mist. May froze, her heart racing. The sound was close. Too close. "Who's there?" she called out, her voice trembling. The growl grew louder, accompanied by the sound of heavy footsteps. A pair of glowing white eyes emerged from the mist, followed by the massive form of a tiger. Its fur was as white as snow, its stripes shimmering like silver threads. May's breath caught in her throat. This was no ordinary tiger. It was the spirit from the legends. The white tiger's piercing eyes locked onto May. She felt an overwhelming sense of awe and fear. It exuded an aura of ancient power, its very presence commanding reverence. "Why have you come here, child of men?" The tiger's voice echoed, deep and resonant. May swallowed hard, her knees trembling. I wanted to know if the stories were true. Are you the guardian of Mount Bai?" The tiger's growl reverberated through the mist. "Curiosity brought you here, but do you understand the price of your intrusion?" May hesitated, unsure how to respond. She could feel the tiger probing her, as if it could see into the deepest corners of her soul. "I mean no harm," she said finally. "I seek wisdom, guidance." The tiger's gaze softened, but its voice remained stern. "Many come seeking power or fortune, only to fall prey to their greed. If you wish to continue, you must prove your worth. Beyond this point lies the true heart of Mount Bai, where the mist tests all who enter. Few emerge." "What kind of test?" May asked, but the tiger did not answer. Instead, it turned and vanished into the mist, leaving only its glowing eyes lingering for a moment longer, before they too faded. With no other choice, May pressed on, her resolve firm despite her fear. The air grew colder as May ventured deeper. The mist seemed alive, whispering her name and weaving shapes that dissolved as soon as she reached for them. She stumbled upon a cavern entrance hidden among the rocks. Inside, the walls were polished to a mirror-like sheen, reflecting her image from all angles. As May stepped in, the air grew thick with an oppressive silence. Her reflection in the walls began to move independently, mimicking her gestures before breaking into distorted versions of herself. One sneered cruelly, another wept uncontrollably, and a third loomed larger with a menacing grin. "You doubt yourself," a voice boomed, the tiger's voice, though it was nowhere to be seen. May's distorted reflections began to speak. "You're weak," the sneering one hissed. "Why did they abandon you?" The weeping one sobbed. "You'll never be enough." The menacing one roared. Their words struck at her deepest insecurities, memories of rejection and loneliness surfacing like old wounds reopened. May clutched her head, tears streaming down her face. "No," she screamed. "I am more than my fears." The reflections shattered, their fragments dissolving into light. The cavern returned to silence, but May felt lighter, as if a burden had been lifted. "You have passed the first test," the tiger's voice said. "But the greatest challenge lies ahead." The cavern led to a clearing bathed in an ethereal glow. In the center stood a crystalline pool, its surface perfectly still. The white tiger was waiting, its form larger and more imposing than before. "This is the heart of Mount Bai," it said. "Drink from the pool, and it will reveal your true self. But beware, if you are not ready to face the truth, it will destroy you." May hesitated. What if the truth was too much to bear? But she had come too far to turn back. Kneeling by the pool, she cupped her hands and drank. The water was icy, sending a shock through her body. Her surroundings dissolved into darkness, and she found herself standing in a void. Memories flashed before her eyes, her parents' deaths, the isolation she felt growing up, her struggles to prove herself. But alongside the pain, she saw moments of strength, how she had survived against all odds, the friendships she had formed, and the courage it took to embark on this journey. "You are more than your past," a familiar voice said. May turned to see the tiger, smaller now, almost gentle. "You have faced your fears and embraced your truth. You are worthy." When May opened her eyes, she was back in the clearing. The white tiger stood before her, its eyes glowing with approval. "You have passed the trials, May," it said. "Few possess the courage and humility you have shown. As a reward, You shall carry the wisdom of the mountain and the strength of the forest within you." The tiger stepped closer, pressing its forehead against hers. A surge of energy coursed through her, filling her with a profound sense of peace and clarity. "Return to your village," it said. "Teach them the balance between humanity and nature. Protect this mountain, for it is your home now." When May descended Mount Bai, the villagers were stunned by her transformation. She carried herself with a quiet confidence, her presence commanding respect. From that day forward, May became the guardian of her people in the mountain. She taught them to honor the forest, to live in harmony with the land, and to respect the spirits that watched over them. And though the white tiger was never seen again, its legacy lived on in May, a bridge between two worlds, a protector of balance. In the heart of the Hmong Mountains, nestled between jagged peaks and dark forests, there was a small village that had long been known for its spiritual practices. The people here lived in harmony with the land, guided by the wisdom of a revered figure, Akau, the village shaman. Akau was not just a healer, he was believed to have the power to commune with spirits, including the mighty tiger spirit that roamed the forests nearby. For generations, the villagers trusted Akau's guidance, and he kept the balance between the human and spirit worlds. But with great power came great responsibility, and soon Akau became obsessed with the thought of gaining even more power to protect his people. He began performing forbidden rituals, calling on dark spirits, binding them to his will, and seeking to control the primal forces of nature. Rumors spread about the lengths Akau was willing to go to increase his strength. Whispers in the village warned that he had crossed a line, that the spirits were no longer answering to him. They were punishing him instead. Yet, the villagers were too afraid to intervene, and Akau's thirst for power grew stronger. One stormy night, the worst occurred. Akau performed the ultimate ritual, a binding ceremony to merge his spirit with the ancient tiger spirit that had protected the land for centuries. But something went horribly wrong. Instead of becoming one with the spirit, Akau became a slave to the tiger, his body twisted and corrupted, his soul lost to the beast. From that night on, Akau was never seen again. The villagers soon realized that the mountain's protective spirit had been corrupted and turned malevolent. The forest that had once been a sanctuary now became a place of terror. Strange occurrences began to haunt the village, livestock disappearing, people hearing the roar of a tiger in the night, and shadows moving in the corners of their homes. The once peaceful village had become a cursed place. It was months before anyone dared to speak of Akau again, but the rumors never stopped. Some said that Akau's body had become a part of the tiger itself, his soul consumed by the spirit's hunger for blood. Others claimed that Akau had transformed into something far worse, an undying beast, a predator stalking the village from the shadows. One day a young man named Sia, who had grown up hearing the stories of Akau, decided to investigate. He was determined to break the curse that had plagued his people. Despite warnings from the elders, Sia set off into the forest, armed with nothing more than a machete and the blessings of his family. The first few days were uneventful, the forest silent and still. But on the third night, as Sia set up camp, he heard it. The unmistakable growl of a tiger. It was not the sound of a regular tiger, though. This was different. It was guttural, full of rage, and filled with an otherworldly echo. Sia froze in fear, clutching his machete as the growl grew louder. Suddenly, a figure appeared in the darkness. It was a man. No, not quite a man. A creature covered in fur, with eyes that glowed a bright, unnatural yellow. The figure was hunched, as if its body was twisted by some unknown force. Sia's heart raced as the creature approached, its breath hot and heavy. He realized with a chill that it was Akau, or what remained of him, his body now fused with the spirit of the tiger. "Akau," Sia whispered, barely able to speak the name. The creature growled in response, its voice a low, guttural snarl. "You should not have come, boy. You cannot break the curse. I am no longer a man. I am the tiger's shadow." Sia raised his machete, but he knew deep down that it would be useless against the monstrosity before him. Akau's human form was barely recognizable, replaced by the hulking figure of the tiger spirit, its claws long and sharp like daggers, its teeth gleaming like ivory. Sia fled into the forest, his heart pounding in his chest. The tiger's shadow, Akau, chased after him, its speed unnatural, almost like it was part of the wind itself. Sia ran blindly, the trees blurring past him as he stumbled through the underbrush. The growls echoed all around him, the sound bouncing off the trees, closing in on him from all sides. He dared not look behind him. The terror was too overwhelming. But he could feel the creature's presence, its eyes burning into the back of his skull. He could hear it breathing, its massive form moving through the woods with predatory grace. The forest, which had once seemed welcoming, now felt like a maze, each turn leading him deeper into the nightmare. The trees twisted unnaturally, their branches reaching out like claws, as if the forest itself was alive and conspiring against him. Finally, after what seemed like hours, Sia collapsed in a small clearing, his body aching and his breath ragged. He tried to gather his wits, but panic clouded his thoughts. The growl stopped, and for a moment, there was silence. Then he heard a voice, soft at first, then louder. It was not the tiger's shadow speaking, but a voice much deeper, more ancient. "You cannot outrun your fate, Sia," the voice whispered, filling the air with a sense of inevitability. Sia turned, heart racing, and saw a figure standing just beyond the clearing. It was Akau, but not the monster that had been chasing him. This was the shaman, his face serene and calm, his eyes filled with ancient wisdom. He was not speaking to Sia directly, but to something else. Sia was paralyzed, unable to move or speak as Akau's form seemed to melt into the mist, his voice growing louder, louder still. "The curse cannot be broken, Sia. You are bound by it as much as I was. To kill the beast is to kill the soul of the land." As Akau's figure faded into the mist, the growls returned louder than before. Sia understood then what he had to do. He had to choose, to break the curse and risk destroying everything that the village held dear, or to embrace the curse and become a part of the tiger's shadow himself. The air grew heavy with tension, as if the very forest was holding its breath. Sia could feel the weight of his ancestors' eyes upon him. The village needed him, but so did the forest. His heart wavered between his duty to his people and the land he loved. Finally, with a deep, resolute breath, Sia stood tall, gripping his machete tightly. He knew what he had to do. He could never walk away from this. The tiger spirit roared in anger as Sia turned and faced it. He wasn't afraid anymore. His ancestors' spirits were with him, and he was ready to face the final battle. As he charged forward, the world around him seemed to slow. The mist thickened and the shadows deepened. It was a battle between humanity and the spirit, between man and nature. The outcome was uncertain, but Sia was no longer the frightened boy who had first entered the forest. The roar of the beast filled the air, the earth shook beneath his feet. But Sia knew he had no choice. Sia's heart raced as he charged through the dense forest, the tiger's shadow hot on his heels. Every step he took seemed like it would be his last, but the fire in his chest kept him moving forward. He could feel the presence of the beast behind him, its hot breath on his neck, the thundering of its steps shaking the ground beneath him. But Sia was not running away anymore. His fear had been replaced by a burning resolve. The spirit of the land had called upon him to confront the curse, and he was ready to face Akau's corrupted form once and for all. He reached the heart of the forest, where the ancient trees towered above, their branches twisting and curling like serpents in the sky. This was the sacred ground where Akau had once performed his forbidden rituals. The ground here felt heavy, thick with the magic of the land, both sacred and cursed. The very air was charged with power. Sia stopped in the clearing, his breathing shallow, his body trembling with anticipation. In the center of the clearing, beneath a massive oak tree, stood the figure of Akau, the tiger's shadow, his eyes glowing a fierce yellow. The once human features of Akau had been utterly consumed by the tiger spirit. His skin had stretched and contorted, now covered in coarse fur, and his eyes were the only remnants of the man who had once been. Akau let out a low growl as he spotted Sia, his claws digging into the earth. "You should not have come back, boy. You will become a part of me, just as I am a part of you. There is no escape." Sia's hands tightened around the hilt of his machete. "I'm not afraid of you, Akau," he said, his voice steady despite the fear gnawing at his insides. "I will end this curse, even if it costs me my life." The ground trembled as Akau charged forward with a roar, faster than any man could move. Sia barely had time to react, leaping to the side just in time to avoid the savage swipe of Akau's claws. The tiger spirit was relentless, moving with supernatural speed and power. Every time Sia tried to strike with his machete, Akau dodged with terrifying ease. The fight was unlike anything he had ever faced before. This was not just a battle of strength, but a battle of will, a contest between the curse and the soul of the land. But Sia did not waver. He had come here not just to fight, but to free the land, to undo the damage Akau had done by merging with the tiger spirit. In his mind, he could hear the voices of his ancestors, whispers urging him to remain strong. He could feel the pulse of the earth beneath his feet, as if the land itself was rallying behind him. With a shout, Sia lunged forward, his machete aimed for Akau's chest. For a moment, time seemed to slow, and Sia could feel the energy of the forest coursing through him. Akau snarled, his claws outstretched to meet him, but it was too late. Sia's machete pierced the corrupted heart of the beast, its power momentarily flickering. Akau let out a guttural scream as the spirit's grip on him weakened. The beast's form began to collapse in on itself, the shadow of the tiger writhing and twisting, trying to maintain its hold. Sia pushed forward with all his might, his body shuddering with exhaustion. He gritted his teeth and pulled the machete out, striking again. This time the blow was true. Akau's monstrous form began to disintegrate, his body breaking apart into a mass of shadow and mist. The tiger spirit let out a final enraged roar before it was swallowed up by the forest, disappearing into the night. For a moment, there was silence. Sia stood in the clearing, his chest heaving, his body battered and broken from the fight. The air around him seemed to calm, the oppressive weight lifting as if the forest itself had exhaled a sigh of relief. Akau, the tiger's shadow, was gone. But Sia knew that the cost had been great. The curse had been broken, but the land would never be the same again. The next morning, Sia returned to his village, his body covered in wounds, his spirit weary. As he approached, the villagers emerged from their homes, their faces a mix of curiosity and fear. They had heard the roars of the tiger in the distance, but when they saw Sia, they knew the battle had been won. Sia walked toward the elder council and knelt before them, the weight of the past night heavy in his heart. He spoke of his encounter with Akau, and the spirit that had once protected the land but had been corrupted by ambition and greed. The villagers listened in silence, some weeping for the loss of Akau, while others breathed a sigh of relief that the curse had been lifted. The elders spoke, their voices filled with sorrow and gratitude. "Sia, you have freed us from a great evil. You have saved the village, but the land will forever remember what happened. The spirits of the forest are not easily forgotten. We will rebuild, but we must honor the tiger spirit that once protected us. We must offer our respect to the land and its forces, for the balance has been restored, yet it will never be the same." Sia nodded, understanding the elder's words. The forest had been changed, and so had he. The battle had cost him more than just his strength. It had taken a piece of his soul, and he knew that the scars of that night would never fade. But there was peace now. The tiger's shadow was no more, and the land could begin to heal. The villagers would rebuild their homes, their lives, and their trust in the spirits. And Sia? He would always remember the lesson he had learned, that the balance of the world between man and spirit was delicate and fragile. It was a balance that must be respected, or else the consequences could be more terrifying than any curse. And as Sia looked toward the mountains where the tiger's shadow had once roamed, he made a vow to never forget the ancient spirits that had guided him through the darkness. The curse was over, but the legacy of the tiger spirit would live on, and so would the memory of the shaman's mistake, and the young man who had been brave enough to undo it.